So good afternoon, everyone. So first, I'd like to thank NIJ, the FBI, everyone on the steering committee for inviting me and other international guests. I think it's always, an honor, and we're very, very happy to be here and try to share our experience. I won't really, I wouldn't pretend that I've got all the miracle solutions. Far from it. Maybe at just the beginning, I would say that I have to fully disclose I'm biased, just because I'm a product of the University of Lausanne in Switzerland. So I've got a certain view about forensic science. So that may be sometimes different from others. The first thing I wanted to share with you is to talk about our big event, which was the Australian-New Zealand Forensic Science Society Symposium that we held in Sydney in September last year. If I tell you that, it's not to make free advertisement for the next symposium. That will be at the end of my presentation. But I wanted to talk about the fact that the theme of the symposium was forensic science on trial. So, very catchy, but I think we had very interesting discussions. And you have here some dot points about what we meant by that. So we discussed a lot about the foundation of forensic science, reflected on your report, the NS report, talked about the effectiveness of forensic science, talked about contextual bias. And I would say not everyone agreed on everything. So I think, as we said, we agreed to disagree. But there was a good common theme that basically we have to take the driver's seat. So forensic science has to take ownership of its own discipline, and we have to be careful and stop being dictated, from others, what we have to do. So in my views, and I share the view with some other people as well on that the problem is more fundamental. It's not just a quick fix that we need to have, and we can fix using simple normative procedures. I've got a few of the main problems here. So there is an apparent lack of unifying paradigm. The roles of forensic science or different types of forensic scientists are not always well understood. The object of study in forensic science and trace evidence sometimes is a bit defocused, and the needs of the various players are often misidentified. And just to give you a little example, when I have to talk about give a definition about forensic science, and there are a lot of very good definitions, and so Keith Inman here, I know in his book, it's a great definition I tell the students. But I did like an undergraduate student what he or she would do, going to Wikipedia. And the first thing to compare, if you have a definition about analytical chemistry, you've got here on the screen, it's relatively clear, or it's even very clear. We have a very good idea about the object of study. We know what an analytical chemist would do. We know, why there are results. Basically, we have very good grasp about what it is. Now, in the same Wikipedia, if we try to find forensic science, and again, there is nothing wrong with this definition, pretty commonly accepted, but compared to the other one, it's very vague. We don't have a very clear definition about what's our object of study. Why are we doing that? So, okay, there is interaction with the legal system and everything which is written is right, but I don't know, I'm not really satisfied by such a definition. So to try to go a bit further in my presentation, with all these discussions last year, I had a case coming back to my mind, a bit, back to the future. It was an old case I did in Switzerland. It must be by definition more than 15 years ago. So I would estimate around 16 years ago. It was a sexual assault case. And how it went, it was in kind of a bushy forest kind of area. It was a very small country town. The suspect or person of interest was pretty much, the police were waiting for him when he got back home pretty much. Immediately, the hands were swabbed, and at that time it was already for the D word, DNA. But very quickly, the suspect confessed his sexual crime, and there was some witness deposition about the fact that there could have been gunshots at the time when the victim was trying to escape. So it was very important for the magistrate in charge. So don't forget, it's an inquisitorial system in Switzerland, so there is a magistrate in charge of the investigation. It was very important for this person to try to solve this issue, because obviously from a legal viewpoint it's different if there is an attempted murder in addition to the sexual assault. Now, the problem is, you're all trace evidence examiners, so you know that, what we do with gunshot residues. Use, stubs, do an SEM analysis, so we've got morphology, we've got the elemental analysis, etc. Now, as you can imagine, we had moist cotton swabs that were used at the time, so it was pretty much a no-no, so we couldn't use such a technique to do gunshot residue analysis. So what we had to do, it was a bulk analysis using, we can use different types of techniques. So at the time, we already had access to an ICP-MS, which is a very good analytical technique for these sort of things. By the way, this is not the actual results, it's just an example of kind of results you have with an ICP-MS. So what you have, it just tells you whether you've got different types of elements. You can do a quantitative analysis saying how much of these different elements you have. But you don't have the morphology, and you don't know whether all these elements are combined in one particle or just coming from different types of materials. So these are our actual results. So I took that from the report at the time. So as you can see, there was a fair amount of lead, barium, and antimony, although it could be seen a bit borderline for antimony. But when you look at the suspect's right hand, and we did what a lot of people are advocating when we try to give expert evidence opinion. It means we have to go to try to find if there is any published research and rely our opinion on research. So it's what we did. So we find at the time some results, some published material about what we can expect on the hands of people who have used a gun, and what we can expect from the hand of a blank general population. And when you look at these numbers, we were pretty much thinking that our results, taking some kind of Bayesian phrasing, that the results would support the proposition that the person of interest was in contact with the gun when the gun was fired. Now, interestingly, in this case, I was working on this case, and I was doing my PhD at the time, and I was doing my PhD work at the same time in the same laboratory as where basically the police employee who did the sampling in this case was doing his own PhD. So from a contextual bias viewpoint, or at least independence, or whatever word you want to use, it could be seen as a bit, not completely orthodox. But anyway, thanks to the sort of very clear discussion we had and sharing of information, all of a sudden I had the information that actually the defendant broke down with his car while he was escaping the scene. And he took off the number plates for whatever reasons, and he had the number plates with him when the police was waiting for him. So I thought, we're better off checking these number plates and the actual car to see what we had. And these are the kind of results we had. So guess what? There was a lot of lead, barium, and antimony in these samples. So you can imagine, it completely changed my interpretation and my conclusion. I'm not sure if you can read that from the back, but we had what I would call miscarriage of justice. Maybe it's a too big name because there was a lot of other steps in the process. But especially last year around this symposium, it came back to me because I thought, the methods I used, they were all especially ICP-MS, was very well established. We could get limit of detection, uncertainty, measurements, error rates, etc. Plus, we had based the interpretation on published research. So we did everything. We ticked all the boxes that we are asked to do now if we want to move forward with a more formal way. And still, it was delivering a wrong interpretation. So I think the lessons there was that basically the situation and context really take precedence over any lab processes. And the uncertainty that we always talk about, and error rate in this case, where actually the uncertainty is caused by the crime itself and the crime scene situation more than anything that is done afterwards. So interestingly, when you look at in the literature, most discussions in recent years are pretty much focused on, in essence, laboratory processes. So we could think that we pretty much, I'm not sure if we hit the nail on the head on that one. Sorry. I mean, in my view, I think we got it right because we had a lot of discussion we got it right because basically we had this free sharing of information with the person who did the sampling. And after all, it's what forensic science is all about, really to assess objective observations against various hypotheses. So I think we have to go back to the basics and think about the trace, because trace evidence is really trace, and trace is fundamental to forensic science, because quite often traces are transferred against our will. It cannot be really reproduced. Quite often it's incomplete. It must be sometimes imaging in the beginning of the process before it can be detected. It's objective, but it's something which contains information about the past. And when it's absent, it means something, but it's very hard to grasp that information. I'll go very quickly there because I'm not sure about the time. Stuart Kine, many years ago in the UK, said the forensic scientist has a dual role. Sometimes he's an investigator, sometimes an evaluator. Now, recently with Olivier Ribot and other of my colleagues in Switzerland, we published a paper and we pretty much put a hypothesis that the forensic scientist is a third role in terms of crime analyst. And what I want to show you there with this slide is there are different dimensions in which forensic science plays some role. And in each dimension, the rules of engagements are pretty different. And I say that to you because in trace evidence, the big problem we've got is that the tools we use, they are all pretty much all the same for whatever dimensions we are in. And everything has been optimized for the court use of what we are doing. Anything we do is because we don't want to be in trouble in court. But sometimes, we may have a role when we do a trace evidence examination, on the intelligence level, if you want, sometimes investigations, etc. So you can imagine we should have different tools, or at least tuned differently, depending on the usage we want to make. And this leads to our big problem. We are too slow, too expensive, because we have one size fits all. And we are probably creating some kind of self-destruction because of that. So where to from here? So I'm happy to discuss, over beer tonight, over the next few days. But I think it's clear that normative procedures, and I'm not advocating that we should, go back to the dark ages and don't need SOPs and quality assurance systems and everything. But it's pretty clear that, it's not going to solve the problem just by itself. And we really need as well to work on the efficiency of forensic science and especially trace evidence and what kind of value we give to investigators and victims as well. And as I said, there is an expanding role in other dimensions than court. Then I think, with others, that it's really paramount to develop and foster a forensic science culture. So it's absolutely great to see this kind of research support that NIJ gives. And I would love to be in the US for that because we don't have these sort of opportunities in terms of funding in Australia. But it's not only in doing the research, but it's really to increasing the forensic science culture so we do the most relevant research and bring the answers we want. And this is really linked to education and training. So there are a few selected recent references. If people, if they want that, I'm happy to share these references in body of an email, or I think that will be on the website anyway. And if you want to experience a 20-odd flight, 20-odd hours flight. Next year, we hold the NZDF or the Australian New Zealand Forensic Science Society Symposium in Tasmania in Hobart. So it's in September. So you can go on the website or ask me, So I'm sure that will be another very interesting symposium. So thanks for listening.